In this chapter, it's chapter 5, we're going to cover the professional roles and behaviors. And you have a bunch of objectives that you need to be able to state and list and describe and define, discuss, all the good stuff. There's more here. And you have key terms. Make sure you be able to identify the key terms for the chapter. First topic we're going to go over is job satisfaction. So self-care is really, really important when you're working with patients. You cannot do a good job with patients unless you're able to take care of yourself. So healthcare professionals are responsible for their own well-being and serve as health role models for patients in the community. So you need to make sure that you get the proper nutrition and sleep and exercise, and you have to have a feeling of safety and security and love and acceptance. And there's your exercise in there. You need to be recognized for your self-esteem and self-accusation. So all of that is very, very important in order for you to be able to take care of others. So if you give all of yourself and have nothing inside of you, it's really, really hard long-term to keep giving to patients. So empathetic care. An empathetic response is one in which understanding and compassion are accompanied by an objective detachment that enables one to act appropriately. A focus on patients' needs will help caregivers respond. Instead of diving into the patient's woes, you need to say, I understand. Okay, that I understand what you're saying to me, and I understand that that's got to be hard. Keep coming. We need to get you inside the scanner. We need to get this x-ray done so that they can find out really what's going on. So keep moving, keep moving. So it's a delicate balance of having the patient felt heard, being able to take a history, all while not diving into sympathetic care. Oh, I know. That's awful. I've been through that. I've done that. And, diving into that, you want to go into your empathetic care. Oh, I understand that's got to be difficult, and keep the patient moving. Burnout. Oh, boy. So response to chronic strain of dealing with constant demands and problems and people under our care. So it typically causes exhaustion, dissatisfaction, anxiety, empathy, depersonalization, and withdrawal. The risk is reduced by self-care and stress relief activities. So yoga works great for me. It's so hard not to get burned out. When you first graduate, you're going to be working a lot to make money. And you are going to get to a point after about 2 years where you're like, you know what? I am totally burned out. Really, really important you guys take your breaks, you take your lunch, that you take your vacations. It's so important for you to ground yourself so that you can care for others, because once you're burned out, it's really, really hard to give good patient care. All right, care of supplies and equipment. So all of our equipment in radiology is very expensive. One DR plate can run $30,000 to $50,000, and you drop it once and it's broken. So an MRI, a head coil can run $100,000 if it's a specialized 3T, a neurovascular coil. So you need to be very, very careful with the equipment. Pay attention to what you're doing to ensure the safety of the patient and of the equipment, because you break the head coil or you break the DR cassette, you're dead in the water. You can't care for the list of patients that you have for that day. So appropriate use and care of the equipment demonstrates ethical behavior. So if you take your head coil or your DR plate and you throw it across the room because you're upset, you've got a big problem on your hands. Participation in professional activities. So provide opportunities to advance in the profession while helping its members and help members to develop leadership skills. So there are a lot of conferences that you can go to that are really, really good. ASRT puts on one that's phenomenal. And there's a bunch of conferences, though. There's a state conference. CSRT puts on a good conference. There's also learning activities that you can do. one-day seminars. You can continue on and get your bachelor's and your master's. There's all kinds of stuff that you can do. And we really, really want you to continue with your education and become phenomenal leaders. Behavior. All right, so morals and ethics. Personal morality is based on lessons of right and wrong that you were taught at an early age. So group morality refers to the moral principles that apply specifically to certain groups of people. So your personal morality is what you were raised, how you were raised, what your values are. Do you live by the values of the church? Do you live by the values of, the societal norms? So that is your foundation of who you are. So your morals hopefully are to help others so that you can be successful in giving good patient care. So group morality is a certain group of people. So with being a radiologic technologist, whether you're in X-ray, CT, mammo, you're going to have a group morality, and it is expected that you live up to that group morality and know the basis for right and wrong when you're dealing with your patients and your equipment. So the moral duties of the physician were defined by ancient Greeks with the Hippocratic Oath. Examples of the group morality for today's healthcare professionals include the duties to provide due care, to maintain professional competence, to maintain confidentiality, and patient information. So that is basically ours also. Although it's for physicians, we fall under that. Nurses fall under that. Respiratory falls under that. Everyone falls under that. Ethics is a branch of philosophy that may be defined as a systemic reflection on morality. Standards of ethics for radiographers, a two-part document that includes our code of ethics, an aspirational document. So the ASRT website, if you look in your book, it's in there. There's the rules of ethics, a more specific list of standards. And these are mandatory, and they're specific standards of minimally accepted professional conduct for all registered technologists and applicants by certification of the ART and are enforceable by the ART. So if you breach our standard of ethics, our rules of ethics, you are going to have to send in, and it's a voluntary disclaimer. So you are to go forward and tell the ART that this happened. So if you had a breach in care and a patient got hurt and you're being sued, you need to tell them. If you got a DUI, you're supposed to tell them. You're supposed to be forthcoming. And that is part of your rules of ethics. And they're all listed there for you. So typically when there's a lawsuit, it's a breach of your rules of ethics. Ethical analysis, the process of evaluating situations in which the correct action is in question. So four basic steps. We look and we say, okay, we identify the problem, we develop alternative solutions, we select the best solution, and we define your selection. So the moral agent is the person responsible for implementing the ethical decision. Okay, so principle-based ethics. So each one of these definitions you're going to have to know. So the first one is benefits, which is the goodness or actions that bring about good are considered right. Non-maleficence, so it's no evil, an obligation not to inflict harm on anyone. Veracity, which is the truth, an obligation to tell the truth. Fidelity, which is faithfulness, an obligation to be loyal or faithful. Justice, which is fairness, an obligation to act with equality. And autonomy, which is self-determination. Respect for the independence of others, and act with self-reliance. So your patient rights. You are to be considerate and respectful with your care. You are to provide information according to what you're going to be doing. Patient privacy and confidentiality. They have a right to be informed and provided an informed consent. They have the right to refuse treatment and they are to be given death with dignity. Legal considerations. All right, this is where we get into the nitty-gritty. So crimes, a felony. It's a serious crime that may be punished by imprisonment, misdemeanor. A less significant crime, usually punished by a fine or imprisonment for less than a year. So if you have either one of those on your record, we need to file with the ART to get you cleared in order to take your national exam. So a tort is a civil wrong committed by one individual against the person or property of another. So usually when we have a legal case, it's a tort. So you did not provide care for, the person you did a civil wrong. So a plaintiff is the suing party. The defendant is the party being sued. Torts, a civil wrong committed by one individual against the person or property of another. There's two categories. There's intentional and unintentional, and know the difference between the two. So you have negligence, refers to the negligent or omission of reasonable care or caution. Malpractice is when there's a lack of professional duty or care between professional persons and a client. So reasonably and prudent person, and we go by the standards of reasonable care. So we look at everyone that's a rad tech, what would they do? So unintentional misconduct. So there's gross negligence, which is reckless disregard for life or limb. There's contributory negligence. It's the behavior of the individual party contributed to the injury. So if the person jumped off the table when you told them not to, then you're like, okay, can I go on this? Can I not? There's corporate negligence. It's where the hospital as an identity is negligent. So the hospital didn't have the cardiac surgeon there when it was a level 1 trauma facility and they were required to have it there. All right, establish a claim of malpractice. Claimant must provide 4 conditions are true. The defendant has a duty to provide reasonable care to that patient. That's number 1. Number 2, the patient sustained some loss or injury. Number 3, the defendant is a party responsible for the loss. Number 4, the loss is attributed to negligence or improper practice. And number 4, actually there's 5, but there you go. Res espe la liqueur, and the thing thinks for itself. So number 4 and 5 kind of go together. Intentional torts. So the assault is you need to know each one of these. Assault, the threat of touching in an injurious way. So if the patient feels as though they're going to be injured, that's a problem. That's assault. Battery is the unlawful touching of a person without consent. So you need to ask the patient prior to touching them. So if you don't ask, you can be charged with battery. So even if you're just touching them to find a landmark, you need to make sure that they're aware that you're going to be touching them. Okay, so false imprisonment, detention of a person against his or her will, and invasion of privacy. That one should speak for itself. So there's that's the HIPAA guidelines that you will be liable for. So libel is written false information to cause damage to reputation. There's slander, which is defamation of character. It's a verbal communication of libel. So if you write it down, that's libel, and if you say it, then that's slander. Malpractice claim requirements. To legally establish a claim of malpractice, a client must prove to the court's satisfaction the 4 conditions are true. The defendant or the person or institution being sued has a duty to provide reasonable care. The patient sustained injury or loss. The defendant is the party responsible for the loss, and the loss is attributed to negligence or improper practice. So, medical recording by radiographers. Effective documentation. Charting is defined as any record that you expect to add to a document. So anything we put inside the computer is part of that. responsibilities for record keeping. Proper record keeping is required to ensure patients are billed accurately, that the supplies are ordered. So if you use a supply, it automatically takes it out of the supply and tells supply to order more. Insurance companies receive verification of the care provided to their clients, and all information in patients' records are considered permanent and confidential. The chart is a legal document that can be sustained or refute charges of negligence or malpractice, and can also serve as a record of behavior. So if it's not charted, it wasn't done. So if you did do something and you didn't chart it, it's as if you never did it. So you need to make sure from a legal side that you chart everything that you do. The chart as a resource used to validate impressions in the patient's assessment. And it's used to obtain vital information on the patient. So are they DNR? Do they have allergies? Is there labs so that we can check their EGFR? And what are they looking for? What is the diagnosis that we're doing? And why are we doing the study? So images are legally considered part of the medical record. They belong to the institution in which they are made. Normal retention is 5 to 7 years. Patients must sign a release form in order to obtain images from the provider. So that's a HIPAA requirement. Accidents and incident reports. So any fall, accident, or occurrence that results in injury or potential harm must be immediately reported to the department supervisor and or radiologist. This is an essential component of the hospital's risk management system. We fill out a report and it goes into a file. And that report, our incident reports, are not subpoenaable. So 7 C's of malpractice prevention. Competence. Knowing and adhering to professional standards and maintaining professional competence reduce liability exposure. Compliance. The compliance by health professionals with policies and procedures in the medical office and hospital avoids patient injuries and litigation. Charting. Charting completely, consistently, and objectively can be the best defense against malpractice claim. Communication. Patient injuries and resulting malpractice cases can be avoided by improving communication among healthcare professionals. They found that if you communicate with your patient, they're less likely to sue you if something goes wrong. So that's something good to know. Confidentiality. Protecting the confidentiality of the medical information is a legal and ethical responsibility of healthcare workers. Courtesy. A courteous attitude and demeanor can improve patients' rapport and lessen the likelihood of lawsuits. Yeah, if you're just nice. They're like, oh, I can't sue that nice girl. Even though she, caused me harm, I can't sue her. She's so nice. So keep that in mind. Caution. Personal injuries can occur unexpectedly on the premise and may lead to lawsuits. So make sure that you pay attention to your surroundings and are doing what's best for the patient. Stay on your toes. I am an expert witness, so for lawsuits within radiology, and I can tell you every case I've had has been from negligence. So people have been harmed from the tech not paying attention. So make sure that you pay attention and aren't one of those cases.